She chased after him to return a forgotten watch. He offered her $2 million to fake a love story. He was a billionaire with a cold heart and a colder reputation, rumored to be incapable of love, maybe even incapable of feeling. She was a struggling waitress just trying to survive. What started as a contract to silence the rumors spirals into something far more dangerous, a connection neither of them understands. Hey family, welcome to True Love Folktales. Before we start, please subscribe, like, and share this video. Your support helps us grow and keeps these stories coming. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss a new tale. Thank you for the love. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the story. The clink of crystal glasses and the low hum of refined conversation filled the air inside Marcello's, the most exclusive fine dining restaurant in the city. Crystal chandeliers hung like frozen fireworks above pristine white tablecloths, while candlelight flickered against gold-rimmed plates. Every table was filled with someone important: CEOs, influencers, political powerhouses, the city's elite. Talia Jenkins weaved between tables with practiced grace, her tray perfectly balanced on one hand, her polite smile permanently etched into her face. Her black uniform was tailored and crisp, but beneath the neat appearance, exhaustion clung to her bones. This was her second double shift this week. Her feet throbbed, but she couldn't afford a break. Not when the rent was overdue, her student loans were piling up, and her mother's new medication wasn't covered by insurance. Still, she worked quietly and efficiently, keeping her head down, until she noticed the buzz. It started with a hush that spread like wildfire. Whispers. Heads turning. Phone cameras subtly raised. Even the chef peeked from the kitchen. And then she saw him. David Cross. He entered with a presence that stole the air from the room. Tall, perfectly put together in a tailored charcoal suit, every line of his body screamed control. His expression was unreadable, stone carved into flesh. Piercing eyes scanned the room not with curiosity, but calculation, like he was measuring something invisible. Talia had seen him before, of course. Everyone had. Billionaire tech innovator. The youngest man to ever make the Forbes list 3 years in a row. But that wasn't why people whispered. It was the rumors. He doesn't feel things, people said. He's a clinical psychopath, someone whispered once while scrolling through an article with his face on it. No empathy. No emotion. Some say he's not even human. He never smiled. Never dated publicly. Never showed joy or anger. Just calm, unnerving precision. The media called him the Ice King. Tonight, he dined alone. Talia didn't serve him personally. That was Gina's table. But she watched from a distance as he wordlessly ordered, ate in silence, eyes locked on his phone the entire time. He left no tip. Not unusual. It was said he didn't believe in gratuity, only efficiency. By the time the shift was over and most of the customers had trickled out, Talia finally exhaled. She was clearing table 6 when she saw it, a sleek, silver wristwatch on the linen tablecloth where David had sat. It gleamed under the dim lights, a minimalist design with an engraved back. Expensive, obviously, but personal too. Her heart jumped. She glanced at the doorway. He had left minutes ago. Without thinking, she snatched the watch, stuffed it into her pocket, and bolted out the front doors, heels clicking sharply against the pavement. The night air slapped her face. The city buzzed around her. Neon signs, horns, laughter spilling from a nearby bar. Then she saw him. He stood next to a sleek black Bentley, the kind of car you only saw in magazines or movies. The driver held the door open as David prepared to step in. "Sir, wait! Your watch!" she shouted, breathless. David turned, brows barely lifting. His eyes fell on her like the temperature dropped a few degrees. She jogged the last few steps and held it out. "You left this behind." He looked down at the watch, took it without a word, and turned to get into the car. "No thank you." No nod. No acknowledgement. "Seriously?" She turned to leave, her heart pounding. Not from exertion, but from the way his gaze made her feel like she wasn't even a person. Then came the voice. "Stop." Just one word. Cold firm. Like an order from a machine. She froze, slowly turned back. He stepped forward, inspecting her in that same measured way, like she was data he was trying to interpret. "How much do you earn here?" he asked. She blinked. I'm sorry. Here. At this restaurant. Your monthly pay. Around 2,000. Give or take tips. David studied her as if doing a mental calculation. Then, I need your services. I'll pay you handsomely. What? She said again, unable to keep the disbelief out of her voice. His tone never changed. I want you to pretend to be in a relationship with me. Publicly. Convincingly. For the next 6 months. She stared at him. Was this a prank? He continued. The press has been relentless. The lack of emotion, the psychopathy theories, it's beginning to affect investors. Perception is bleeding into business. I need a narrative shift. Talia's mind reeled. And you think fake dating a waitress is the solution? You're not famous. You're not predictable. You saved my watch. You'll do. She almost laughed. That's insane. I'll pay you $2 million if the narrative is successful. Everything inside her went still. But this wasn't just money. This was stepping into a lie. A performance. Becoming someone else. Talia closed her eyes. She saw her mother's face, pale and tired, smiling weakly from the couch where she spent most of her days now. She saw the overdue medical bills piling up, the call from the pharmacy refusing to refill without payment. She picked up the pen. She signed. 1 week later, she was in David Cross's penthouse, and it was nothing like she expected. It wasn't cold. It was clinical. No personal photographs. No books on shelves. Everything was black, steel, and glass, minimalism weaponized. The only sign of life was the faint smell of coffee and the low hum of white noise machines. David stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, overlooking the skyline like he was surveying his empire. He didn't turn when she entered. Instead, he simply said, "You're early. You said 10 a.m. It's 10, she replied. He finally faced her. I like early, he said, as if that were enough to make it a rule. Talia wore what Clara, David's assistant, called a casual elite outfit, which had been selected for her from a showroom. Designer jeans, silk blouse, a delicate necklace that probably cost more than her car. She felt like a walking mannequin. Clara appeared from behind a glass wall. Sharp features, tablet in hand, she was the enforcer of every clause in the contract. We're starting public appearances this weekend, she said. There's a charity art auction in Midtown. The press will be present. You'll arrive together. Be tactile. Tactile? Talia asked. Hold hands, David replied. Clara swiped through her tablet. Also, we'll need to boost social media presence. We'll start soft launching the relationship tonight. A leaked photo at lunch should be enough to start speculation. Wait, you're planning leaks? Talia asked, brow raised. Of course. This isn't improv, Ms. Jenkins. It's narrative engineering, David replied, folding his arms. Her stomach tightened. This was already spiraling into something far bigger than she had imagined. You don't have to pretend to be in love with me when we're alone, he said suddenly, as if sensing her discomfort. This is purely strategic. His words stung more than she expected. She didn't want to care, but something about how easily he separated emotion from action unsettled her. I didn't think I would, she said coolly. A flicker of something passed in his eyes. Amusement? Approval? It was gone too fast to tell. That weekend, they made their debut. Talia arrived in a custom navy gown tailored to her figure, hair styled into soft waves, makeup elegant but understated. David wore a black tuxedo with a midnight blue tie that matched her dress, another calculated decision. When he offered his arm as they exited the town car, her fingers hesitated before looping through his. Cameras flashed. Reporters whispered. The room took notice. Inside the art auction, David was magnetic. Not warm. Never that, but polished, composed, and perfectly attentive. He leaned close when she spoke, offered her his drink, guided her through the gallery with a hand at the small of her back. It looked like affection. It was an illusion. Still, she couldn't help noticing the shift in energy around them. Eyes that once avoided him now lingered with curiosity. Conversations softened when he approached. "The Ice King has a heart," one journalist murmured behind them. Talia heard it. So did David. Later, in the car, she glanced at him. "That didn't seem so hard for you." He shrugged. "I'm excellent at pretending." Something in his voice made her chest tighten. By the end of the first month, the internet had dubbed them #crossed_hearts, a pun that made Talia cringe. Social media exploded with theories and praise. "They're opposites," people tweeted. "She's sunshine, he's steel." The plan was working, but behind closed doors the lines blurred. They spent hours together, dinners, rehearsals, practice interviews. She learned he hated loud noises, preferred analog clocks to digital, and never watched TV. He drank tea instead of coffee and had a photographic memory. He had no pets, no hobbies, no friends. And yet, he listened when she spoke. Not just out of obligation, really listened. She would mention something small, her love of old music, her favorite poet, and a day later, it would appear. A playlist in her inbox. A quote on a note tucked into her handbag. "You're surprisingly thoughtful for someone who claims not to feel," she said one day. David didn't respond, but he didn't deny it either. One night, after a gala, they stood outside her apartment. The driver waited patiently behind them. "Good work tonight," he said. "You say that like I'm your employee," she replied. "You are." She smiled bitterly. "Right. I forgot." He hesitated. Then, to her surprise, reached forward and brushed a loose strand of hair from her cheek. It was a practice gesture. Perfect for the cameras. But there were no cameras now. Talia's breath caught. "I'm going inside," she said quickly. He nodded. "See you tomorrow." She shut the door behind her and leaned against it, her heart pounding. Because for the first time, she wasn't sure if she was pretending anymore. They said it was just acting. A role. A performance. A well-paid illusion. But lies, when repeated long enough, start to feel like truth. Talia knew this better than anyone now. It had been 3 months since she signed the contract. 3 months of flashbulbs, carefully staged moments, fake kisses, rehearsed smiles, and whispered lies in public spaces. 3 months of being his. Not in the real way, not in any way that mattered, but in the way that made the world believe something impossible. That David Cross could feel, that he could love, that they were real. And somewhere between the charity galas and rooftop dinners, between the hand-holding and choreographed glances, something shifted. Not in him. In her. She was falling. It wasn't a sudden thing. It wasn't dramatic or obvious or loud. It was slow, like melting ice. Like something dormant waking up after a long winter. It was the way he looked at her during interviews, making it seem like no one else existed. The way he listened with terrifying focus, remembering things she didn't even realize she said. The way he never flinched when her hand found his in a crowd, or when she leaned into him for warmth. They had a rhythm now, a carefully constructed dance. 1,000 tiny acts of intimacy that had never truly happened. But the body doesn't always know the difference between a lie and a feeling. The heart, especially one long starved, begins to feed on illusions when it has nothing else. And Talia's heart had never known hunger like this. One afternoon, they were in his private garden, a rooftop space filled with minimalist landscaping, bonsai trees, and the soft trickle of a stone fountain. She sat cross-legged on the lounge chair, scrolling through social media. Photos of them from the night before were everywhere. "Look at this," she said, tilting the phone toward him. "The comments are wild. One says you've been replaced by a clone with a heart." David didn't even look up from his tablet. "That's progress." She studied him. "Do you ever get tired of pretending?" He set the tablet down slowly. "I don't pretend. I present. There's a difference." Talia frowned. "Sometimes I can't tell when you're presenting and when you're just you." He tilted his head, assessing her like he always did, like she was a problem to solve. "You're getting too comfortable." "Maybe you're getting too convincing," she replied, forcing a laugh. Silence hung between them like smoke. Then, after a long pause, he said, "I don't think about it that way. There is no me when I'm off stage. There's just quiet. The honesty in his tone startled her. "You really believe that?" she asked softly. He nodded. "I function. I create. I acquire. That's all I've ever needed. No joy. No fear. No love," she pressed. His eyes flickered. "Those things waste energy. Emotions get in the way of logic. They make people weak." Her chest ached. "Is that what you think I am? Weak?" He turned to her, voice lower now. "No. I think you're dangerous. Because you make me wonder what I'm missing." Talia lay awake that night in her apartment, staring at the ceiling as his words echoed in her mind. "You make me wonder what I'm missing." It wasn't love. It couldn't be. But it was something. A crack in the mirror. A shiver in the machine. She didn't want to fall for him. God, she knew better. He had made it clear from day one. This was a contract. A story. A manipulation of perception. He wasn't interested in real feelings. But her heart didn't care about contracts. And the worst part, he had warned her. From the very beginning, he had told her the rules. She was the one breaking them. The next few weeks were a torment she couldn't explain. They attended a weekend getaway for a tech summit in Iceland. Sleek lodges, mountain views, a carefully orchestrated candid hot spring photo that nearly broke the internet. He pulled her close for warmth under northern lights. His hand brushed her cheek when he tucked a stray hair behind her ear. Their eyes met, and she forgot, for one blinding second, that it was all fake. But in private, it was the same David. Polite, professional, cold. He never kissed her unless a camera was watching. He never touched her unless the setting required it. And even when he was kind, when he brought her coffee exactly how she liked it, or remembered that her mom's chemo was scheduled that week, it was always without emotion, as if kindness itself were mechanical. Executed, not felt. One night, she tried to bring it up. They were sitting in his penthouse again. Another post-event debrief. She was still in heels, her feet aching, makeup smudged. "I need to ask you something," she said, her voice fragile. He looked up from his notes. "Go on." She hesitated. "Have you ever loved someone?" He blinked. "No. Just like that. No pause. No elaboration. Not even once. No. I've studied it. Observed it. But I've never experienced it." Talia looked down at her hands. "That's sad. It's efficient." "No," she said, her voice shaking. "It's empty." David stood, suddenly distant. "We're 2 months from the contract end. I suggest we maintain focus. Feelings complicate things." She stood too, hurt burning under her skin. "You're right. It's just a performance." He didn't answer. But that night, when she left, something shifted in him too. He watched the door after it closed. Felt the silence grow louder. And for a reason he couldn't name, he couldn't stop thinking about the way her voice had cracked when she said the word empty. He didn't understand it. But it stayed with him. It was supposed to be a night of celebration. A charity ball held in honor of David Cross's recent pledge, a $10 million donation to a global clean water initiative. The guest list was stacked with dignitaries, CEOs, celebrities, and media outlets hungry for their next headline. And of course the couple of the hour, the billionaire and the waitress who had captured the world's attention. Talia stood in front of the gilded mirror in the penthouse dressing suite, smoothing the deep emerald satin of her gown. Her makeup was flawless, her hair twisted into soft curls that framed her face. David had chosen the dress himself, or rather, Clara had under his direction. It hugged her waist, dipped low across her back, and sparkled under the soft chandelier light like something out of a fantasy. She looked perfect. So why did she feel like she was about to break? David entered the room, tuxedo sharp, cufflinks flashing. His eyes met hers in the mirror. There was no warmth there. No softness. Just focus. "You look appropriate," he said simply. She swallowed. "Thanks." He walked up behind her, fixing the fall of her hair with clinical precision. "Smile tonight," he said. "It's important we close strong." "Close," she echoed, already knowing, already hurting. He didn't answer. The ballroom was a dream. Candlelight shimmered off tall crystal glasses. A string quartet played near the stage. The ceiling arched like a cathedral, gilded and grand. Waiters carried trays of champagne flutes and hors d'oeuvres so delicate they looked painted. Cameras flashed as David and Talia entered, hand in hand. The crowd parted. Whispers began. Talia smiled on cue. She leaned into him like she was in love. She laughed at his quiet comments, not because they were funny, but because that's what the crowd expected. Her body knew the steps now. She was the perfect partner in the dance of illusion. But her heart felt like glass. Something was wrong. He was distant. Too distant, even for David. The warmth he sometimes faked with ease was gone tonight. There was no hand at her back, no whispered commentary in her ear, no quiet check-in when the crowd shifted. He was present, physically, but the performance was fraying. Still, she kept up the act. She had no choice. Until it all ended. It happened at the height of the evening. The music softened. The host took the stage. Applause filled the room as David Cross was introduced for a short speech about philanthropy, innovation, and the importance of public trust. He walked up to the podium, tall and magnetic, his every move deliberate. Talia stood off to the side in perfect view, ready for the cameras. Ready to smile and wave like she always did. He began with charm, brief, efficient praise for the event, for the cause, for the generosity of the crowd. But then his tone shifted. He looked straight ahead. Not at her. Through her. "There's one more announcement I'd like to make," he said, voice even. "A personal one." Talia straightened, the smile still frozen on her face. "I'd like to thank the media for respecting our privacy during the past few months. It hasn't been easy, living under such scrutiny. But I'm grateful for the support we've received." He paused, then continued. "However, I also believe in transparency. So I want to confirm that my relationship with Miss Talia Jenkins has ended." The silence was instant. Sharp. Brutal. Talia's heart stopped. Her breath hitched, so subtly she almost fooled herself. But her fingers went numb. Her legs felt like they might collapse. "We remain close friends," David added, "and I will always respect her. But we are no longer romantically involved. I ask that you give her the privacy she deserves." She didn't hear the rest. Couldn't. It all blurred, applause murmurs, heads turning to look at her. No warning. No discussion. He had blindsided her. On stage. Publicly. Brutally. She smiled. Because she had no other choice. Because if she didn't, she might fall apart right there under the chandeliers. And he didn't even look at her. She left before the night ended. Clara tried to stop her. "Talia, wait, this isn't the plan." But Talia couldn't hear anything through the roar in her ears. She tore the dress off in the back of the waiting car. Scrubbed her lipstick off with the edge of a napkin. Took her hair down like she was removing armor. By the time she reached her apartment, the official press release was already up online. "Cross ends romance. Still friends," he says. An email arrived within minutes. From Cross Holdings legal team subject, final payment and closure. "Dear Miss Jenkins, as outlined in the agreement, the arrangement has now reached its successful conclusion. A final payment of $2 million has been transferred to your account. All confidentiality clauses remain in effect in perpetuity. Please refrain from making further contact with Mr. Cross. We wish you well in your future endeavors." It was over. Just like that. Not even a message from him. Not even a goodbye. She cried for the first time in weeks. The kind of crying that shakes your ribs. The kind of heartbreak that makes you question your own reality. She had known it was a contract. A deal. A game. But deep down, she had hoped for something more. Even if he couldn't say it. Even if he didn't understand what she was feeling. She thought maybe he had felt something too. She was wrong. He had played the final card, ended the act, closed the curtain. And she was left in the dark. The next morning, her phone rang nonstop. Tabloids. Talk shows. Her name was trending. People speculated, some blamed him, some blamed her. Some called it a publicity stunt. Others said she'd come up, off a rich man and walked away clean. They didn't know the truth. They didn't know how deeply it hurt to be discarded like a tool. to be paid off for feeling too much. She stared at the $2 million deposit on her phone. It was everything she thought she wanted. It had never felt more hollow. And somewhere across the city, David Cross stood alone in his penthouse. No fanfare. No music. No company. He poured himself a glass of scotch, stared at the skyline, and reviewed the press reaction on his screen. The operation was a success. The headlines had changed. The investors were satisfied. The rumors had died. He took a sip, sat in silence, then turned off the screen. And for the first time in his adult life, he felt nothing, except for one small, quiet ache. A strange pull he couldn't name. He had never cared about anyone. But he couldn't stop thinking about the girl who had once chased him down with a forgotten watch. The penthouse was quiet. Too quiet. David Cross had always preferred silence. He built his empire in it. Late nights in soundproof rooms, ideas formed in stillness. Silence was his sanctuary, his logic chamber, his fortress. Noise was inefficient. Emotion was noise. The world could keep its chaos. David preferred order. But this silence, this was different. This silence echoed. He sat in his living room, a vast, sterile expanse of black leather and cold marble. No photographs on the shelves. No art on the walls. No clutter, no warmth, no signs of life. Just minimalist design and the faint tick of a mechanical clock. He hated that sound now. It reminded him of her. She had mentioned it once, something stupid, insignificant. I like analog clocks. They feel honest. Digital time is just numbers. But this, you can hear passing time. She'd smiled when she said it. A real smile. Not the fake kind they practiced in the mirror before events. Not the public smile she wore like armor. A real one. Just for him. He hadn't thought about it at the time. But now he couldn't stop. He stood, abruptly, and crossed the room to the wall where that damn clock ticked. He removed it, and dropped it into the trash. It had been a week since the charity ball. A week since he stood on that stage and said the words that ended everything. Since then, he'd received nothing but praise. His inbox was full. Investors applauding his honest vulnerability. PR firms offering six-figure deals for interviews. Tech magazines calling it the best software brand in recent corporate history. The plan had worked. Every objective met. Narrative redefined. Problem solved. But David hadn't opened a single message. Because none of it felt like a victory. His routine fractured. Meetings blurred. He skipped 2 board briefings, something he hadn't done in a decade. He fired his chef for over-seasoning his steak. He snapped at Clara, then immediately dismissed her for the week without explanation. She didn't protest. Just left quietly, with a sad look in her eyes. He tried to return to his old rhythm, late nights of code and concept planning, meditation, control. He tried to focus on acquisition metrics and performance modeling, but his mind kept straying. He would catch himself staring at his phone, not expecting a message, knowing there would be none, but still checking. She had gone completely silent. Not a text, not a call, not even a reaction on social media. And yet, he kept looking. One night, he poured himself a drink and sat at the piano. He didn't play, not really, but he'd learned enough to mimic competency. It had been part of the performance once, when a Forbes journalist shadowed him for a feature on the emotional lives of the elite. Talia had been there that night. She sat on the edge of the piano bench, watching him, her chin resting in her palm. "You could be really good," she'd said softly, "if you let yourself feel something when you played." He'd brushed it off, said something snide about aesthetics over function. But now, sitting at the keys, the memory played louder than any note he pressed. He touched middle C. Let it linger. It sounded hollow. Just like him. David didn't know what he was feeling. It was foreign. Uncoded. Outside the parameters of everything he had trained himself to be. He had always believed emotions were inefficiencies. Evolutionary leftovers that got in the way of decision-making. So why did he feel like he was crumbling from the absence of something? Why did her silence feel louder than any confrontation? Why did his chest ache when he walked past the terrace, where she once laughed at him for not knowing how to make a S more. One night, he pulled up the surveillance feed from the penthouse. Clara had the cameras installed for security, and he had never paid them much attention. But now he scrolled back through old footage. There she was, Talia, in his kitchen, making tea, dancing in her socks when she thought no one was looking, humming a song under her breath, laughing, really laughing, at something he had said, even though he couldn't remember what it was. She looked alive, and he looked dead, inside, robotic. As always, he watched her touch the back of his neck once, gently, when she passed by him in the hallway. He hadn't reacted. Not then. But watching it now, something cracked open in him. He leaned forward, rewound it, watched it again, and this time, when her fingers brushed the back of his neck, he felt it, like a ghost of sensation. A delayed touch. A phantom ache. He couldn't sleep. His bed, once a place of perfect stillness, now felt cavernous. He lay awake with images of her flashing in his mind. Not the public ones, not the performance. The private ones. The small ones. The ones she didn't know he noticed. The way she tilted her head when she listened. The way she said thank you for the tiniest things. The way she kept waiting for him to see her, really see her, even when she knew he wouldn't. And then he remembered the last thing she said to him before that final event. Have you ever loved someone? No, he had said. He rolled onto his back now, staring at the ceiling. Was that still true? He thought it was. But the hollow he felt now, this unnameable grief, it didn't fit in the world he'd built for himself. He missed her. Not her role. Not the performance. Her. And that wasn't supposed to happen. He got out of bed, went to his desk, pulled out the contract she had signed. He read every page. Not because he needed to. He had memorized it. He read it because it was the only proof he had that she had once been his, even if only on paper. And when he reached the last page, where she had signed her name in steady, looping handwriting, he stared at it for a long time, then whispered something he had never said before. To the empty room. To himself. To the air. I think I made a mistake. The sun rose over the city with sharp, merciless light, slicing through glass towers, igniting rooftops in gold and white. David stood in front of his floor-to-ceiling windows, hands in his pockets, jaw tight. He hadn't slept. Again. His suit still fit perfectly. His hair was still combed. His routine hadn't broken. But he had. Something inside him had fractured. Not loud, not dramatic. Just a shift. A realization he could no longer compartmentalize or rationalize into irrelevance. He missed her. Not in the abstract way he'd read about in behavioral psychology papers. Not the calculated ache of a routine lost. This was different. This was specific. He missed the sound of her voice in the morning, still soft with sleep. He missed her mismatched socks. He missed her quiet humming when she watered the single plant she insisted on keeping alive in his sterile penthouse. He missed her presence. And for the first time in his life, that need, that yearning, didn't make him feel weak. It made him feel alive. He tried to fight it at first. Of course he did. He drafted an email. Talia, I hope you're well. There are a few loose ends I believe we should discuss, if you're open to that. Best, DC. He deleted it. He tried to call Clara to request a neutral meetup under the guise of a business check-in. He hung up before it rang. None of that was real. None of that was human. And he needed to do this as himself. No contract. No strategy. No performance. So he walked out of his penthouse, got into the back of his car, and said 3 words his driver had never heard from him. Take me there. The house was modest. Suburban. Tucked behind a row of sycamore trees and a weathered picket fence that leaned slightly to the left. Her car was parked out front, the same beat-up sedan she refused to replace, even when she'd had millions wired into her account. David stepped out of the car. He didn't knock right away. He stood there, palms damp, breath uneven. And for the first time since he was a child, he realized he was afraid. Not of rejection. Not of exposure. He was afraid that maybe, just maybe, he was too late. What if she had moved on? What if she never wanted to see him again? What if she hated him? He raised his hand and knocked. Talia opened the door in a loose t-shirt and leggings. Her hair was tied in a knot. She looked like she had just woken up. The sight of him made her freeze, like the air had been sucked from the space between them. "David," she said softly. He swallowed. His voice, when it came, was low and rough. "Hi." Silence stretched between them like a wire, taut and trembling. She blinked. "What are you doing here?" He didn't have an answer ready. Not a speech. Not a plan. "I don't know," he admitted. "But I think I need to say something. And I'd like to say it without assistance. Without PR. Without all of that." She hesitated. He looked tired. More human than she'd ever seen him. The edges of him were frayed. "Come in," she said finally, stepping aside. He didn't sit. He paced. She leaned against the counter, arms crossed, watching him like he might detonate at any moment. "I've been thinking," he said. "About you. About everything." "David." "No. Please," he said, stopping mid-step. "Just let me say this. I'm not good at this. I know that. I don't know how to do this the right way. But ever since you left, I didn't leave. You ended it." He flinched. She saw it. "You stood on a stage," she said, her voice rising, "and pretended like it didn't matter. Like I didn't matter. You humiliated me. You didn't even say goodbye." "I thought I was protecting you," he said quickly. "I thought if I made it clean, if I kept it professional, it would hurt less." "Well, it didn't," she snapped. He looked down. "I know." The air between them shifted. The anger was still there, raw and real, but beneath it was something deeper. Older. Wounded. He stepped forward. "I didn't think I could feel," he said quietly. "Not really. I thought whatever made people love, whatever made them care, it skipped me. That I was born broken." Talia's throat tightened, but she said nothing. "But you," he continued, voice trembling, "you made me feel something I couldn't explain. It scared me. I didn't know how to handle it, so I pushed it away. I told myself it was the contract, that it was all a performance. But when you left, it was like..." He stopped, eyes closing for a moment. It was like someone cut the power. Like the whole world went gray. A tear slid down her cheek before she could stop it. He saw. "I miss you," he said. "Not the version the world saw. You. The girl who danced in my kitchen. Who hated digital clocks. Who looked at me like I was something worth seeing." She stepped forward now, slowly. "You told me to stick to the contract," she whispered. "You told me not to fall for you. I know. You told me you couldn't love." He met her eyes, voice raw. "I was wrong." Silence again. But this time it was different. Heavy. Holy. He reached out, hesitating. His fingers brushed her hand, tentative, as if afraid she'd pull away. "I think," he said, voice shaking. "No, I know. I love you." She stared at him. Then she did something that undid him completely. She laughed. Through the tears. A broken, beautiful sound. "Oh my God," she whispered. "You're actually crying." His hand flew up, surprised, as if discovering the tears himself. She took his hand fully now. "You're a disaster," she said, smiling through her pain. "I am," he agreed, voice hoarse. "And I'm still mad. I deserve that. But..." She leaned forward and kissed him, gently. No cameras. No crowd. No performance. Just them. "I love you too," she whispered. Outside, the city continued, unaware that the Ice King had finally melted. Not through force or logic or design, but through something he never thought he'd feel. Love. The first thing David did was delete the contract. Not archive it. Not store it away in an encrypted folder. He opened the document, the one that had dictated every step of their manufactured love, and without a second thought, he hit delete. Then he emptied the trash. It was symbolic, yes, but also necessary. Because if this was going to work, if they were going to work, it had to start from nothing. No clauses. No payments. No control. Just them. They didn't announce their reconciliation. There were no press releases, no carefully leaked photos, no elegant red carpet debuts. The world didn't know that Talia Jenkins and David Cross were seeing each other again, because it wasn't for the world anymore. It was for them. For the first time, there were no expectations, no deadlines, no scripted displays of affection. And that made it terrifying and beautiful. The first few weeks were quiet, awkward even. David wasn't used to explaining himself. He wasn't used to sharing, and she wasn't used to trusting him. Not fully. They talked in half steps, slow and cautious, like animals learning not to flinch. But slowly, trust began to take root, in the small, quiet ways that truly mattered. He started asking questions, not out of strategy, but curiosity. He asked about her favorite childhood memories, her dreams, what scared her, what calmed her. And he listened. Not like before, not for advantage. He listened and remembered. Talia moved back into her old apartment despite David offering her a wing of his penthouse. "I don't want to be absorbed into your world," she told him, holding her ground. "I want to meet you in the middle. Or not at all." That was new for him, the idea of middle. He had lived his whole life in absolutes. Control or chaos. Dominance or failure. But he agreed. And when he stayed at her place for the first time, sleeping beside her in a too-small bed with mismatched sheets and a squeaky ceiling fan, he realized something profound. He felt safe. For the first time in his life, he didn't need a fortress to feel protected. He needed her. They began building something real. Not perfect. Not dramatic. Real. He met her mother, who was recovering slowly and greeted David with all the suspicion of a lioness guarding her cub. At one point, she pulled Talia aside and whispered, "Does he blink?" Talia laughed so hard she nearly cried. But David was patient. He showed up. He brought groceries. He remembered her mother's appointments and sent flowers on her birthday. Eventually, she softened. "You're still weird," she told him one day. But maybe not heartless. It was the closest thing to approval David ever got. And he took it like a trophy. Talia took time to heal too. There were nights she would still wake up panicked, heart racing from dreams where he stood on a stage and erased her again. But he was there. Not hovering. Not performing. Just present. Sometimes he held her hand until she calmed. Other nights, he just listened, letting the silence between them be a comfort rather than a weapon. And every time she looked at him, really looked, she saw the difference. He was trying, not to control, not to manipulate, to connect, to love. He started doing small things, beautiful, ridiculous things. He bought a second-hand piano, just like the one she used to play in college, and placed it in her apartment. He wrote her a note when he knew he couldn't find the words in person. "I don't understand love yet, but I know that I want to learn it with you." She cried reading it. Not because it was poetic, it wasn't, but because it was real. Unfiltered. Uncalculated. Just like him. Months passed. They still argued. Still got things wrong. David sometimes retreated into silence when things got emotionally overwhelming. Talia still had moments where she questioned if he truly loved her or was just mimicking affection. But the difference now was that they talked about it. No running. No hiding behind logic. One night, they sat on her tiny couch, sharing tea in silence, the city lights outside blinking like distant stars. He looked at her, suddenly serious. "I used to think love was a myth," he said. "A chemical illusion. And now?" she asked. He took her hand, pressed his forehead to hers. "Now I think it's the only thing that's ever been real." They didn't need a grand finale. No viral wedding. No spectacle. Just a quiet morning, 6 months later. David stood in her kitchen, wearing one of her oversized sweatshirts, struggling to make pancakes. She laughed, watching him fumble with the batter. "I built an AI that can read human emotion," he grumbled. "Why is this harder?" "Because love isn't about perfection," she said, kissing his cheek. "It's about trying." He looked at her, hair messy, eyes still soft with sleep, and smiled. A real smile. No cameras. No audience. Just them. And for the first time, it was enough. We have come to the end of this story. I hope you enjoyed it. If so, do not forget to like and subscribe to my YouTube channel and turn on your notification for more beautiful stories.